I walked into the luxury boardroom as the wife of a billionaire CEO's, Sony, walked out jobless, betrayed, and humiliated. My father-in-law fired me while staring into my eyes without a single ounce of mercy. My husband sat still like I was a stranger but. The shock came when 22 employees stood up and walked out with Memi. Name is Isabella Carter, and I never imagined that the most powerful man in York would one day crush my entire career with a single sentence. The man was my father-in-law, Richard Hale, billionaire CEO of Hale Enterprises. A corporate empire built with steel edges, ruthless decisions, and absolute dominance. His son Adrian Hale was my husband, a man I once believed truly loved me, but love inside these wealthy walls is often nothing more than a polished illusion. I did not marry for money. I married for hope, for partnership, for a future where my talent mattered, not my background. I came from a simple middle-class home. My mother worked as a nurse, and my father drove a delivery truck. I studied hard, got scholarships, graduated with honors, and dreamed of creating a life defined by my own achievements, not anyone else's wealth. When I married Adrian, I truly believed I was stepping into a family, not a battlefield. But Richard Hale never accepted me from day one. He always looked at me the way powerful men look at anything that threatens their control, with suspicion and quiet hostility. His words were smooth, but his eyes were sharp. He acted as if I was an outsider invading his perfect dynasty. Still, I did not break. I joined Hale Enterprises not through favor, but through a competitive hiring process. I entered as project development manager, leading teams with dedication, discipline, and empathy. I treated people like humans in a company where fear was the primary motivator. My teams performed exceptionally, and within 2 years I had built a reputation for integrity and innovation. But integrity is dangerous in a world built on ego and manipulation. The morning I was fired began like any other. I wore my navy suit, tied my hair neatly, and walked into the towering glass building that symbolized power and silent pressure. The boardroom was full that day, executives, directors, analysts, all sitting in anticipation, awaiting the quarterly review, a day where futures were made or destroyed. I took my seat near the center, my laptop ready, my reports refined, my mind clear. I had delivered excellent results and expected improvement discussions, not disaster. But the moment the doors opened, everything changed. Richard Hale walked in with the confidence of a man who believed he owned not just the company, but every life inside it. His gray suit perfectly tailored his expression, cold and unreadable. When he stood at the head of the long marble table, the entire room fell silent. It was the kind of silence that warned storms were coming. Isabella, stand up. His voice was heavy, sharp, final. Everyone turned toward me. I felt dozens of eyes like spotlights. I rose slowly, keeping my posture straight, even though my heart trembled inside. Richard looked directly at me and said one sentence that shattered 2 years of work. Isabella, from this moment, you are terminated from Hale Enterprises. The room gasped. People exchanged shocked glances. Adrian, sitting near the far end, tightened his jaw but remained silent. Silent like a man protecting his comfort over his Wi-Fi. Asked calmly, "Sir, what is the reason for this sudden decision?" He raised his hand dismissively, as if my question was a noise rather than a right. You no longer fit the vision of this company, Isabella. Your values conflict with our operational direction. You are simply not the right person for our future strategies. Not the right person. The same woman whose projects saved millions, whose teams delivered results, whose leadership inspired loyalty. Not the right person. Then he added without shame or hesitation, and Adrian agrees with this decision. That line pierced deeper than the firing itself. Adrian looked down, unable to meet my eyes. He said nothing, not a single word. He chose silence over truth, silence over support, silence over May. Could not believe it. The man who promised to stand by me had abandoned me for his father's approval. Richard continued, your employment was always conditional. Isabella, conditional on harmony within this family. And clearly that harmony no longer exists. Family harmony, he called it. I called it control and humiliation, wrapped in expensive suits, I breathed. Slowly refusing to let my voice break, I deserved respect, and I would not allow anyone to strip away my dignity. Then something unexpected happened. My entire project team stood up, first Layla, then Thomas, then Renee, then Marcus, until 22 people stood behind me like a wall of courage, their faces determined, unafraid, unbroken. Ella spoke firmly, "If Isabella leaves, we leave too." Every head turned, jaws dropped, shock rippled across the room. Richard stared at them, furious but speechless. No one ever defied him, yet here were 22 voices choosing integrity over fear, humanity over power. Whispered softly to them, "You do not have to do this for me, Thomas," replied Isabella. "You treated us like people, not tools. You led with respect and strength. We stand with you, not with intimidation." I felt my throat tighten, but I stayed strong. Tears belonged to later. Not here, not now. I took my badge, placed it gently on the table, and faced Richard one last time. I had no anger, no hate, only resolve. He could take my job, but he could not take my worth. I turned toward Adrian. He still did not look up. His silence was my closure. I walked out of the room, my heels echoing like war drums. 22 people walked behind me, each step a rebellion against a king who believed he could not be challenged. When the doors closed behind us, I felt something powerful rise inside me. Had lost my job, my position, my marriage, and my place in the Hale Empire. But I had gained loyalty, respect, and the beginning of a revolution that Richard Hale never saw coming. When the boardroom doors closed behind us, the silence of the hallway felt strangely powerful. 22 people had walked out with me. 22 souls who believed in my leadership more than my own husband did. My heels tapped softly against the marble floor as we moved farther away from the empire that had swallowed my identity for 2 long years. For a moment I stopped, inhaled deeply, and let the cold air settle inside my chest. But I was not free yet. I was simply standing at the beginning of a long, uncertain road. My team watched me, waiting for direction, hope, determination, and a little fear reflected in their eyes. They had risked their careers for me, and I could not let that loyalty fall into emptiness. Leela stepped forward, her warm voice breaking the silence. "Isabella, what do we do now?" Do now, the question echoed in my mind. My life had just been uprooted, my marriage quietly shattered, my position stripped from me in a room full of power-hungry faces, and yet these people, these 22 loyal humans, were looking at me as if I still held a torch. They were willing to follow through the darkest tunnels. I straightened my shoulders and said, "We breathe." First, a few soft laughs escaped the group. It felt good, human, warm. A small flame in cold air. That moment allowed all of us to loosen the tight knots in our chests. Then, slowly, they gathered around me, waiting for Mortimus. Asked Isabella, "Do you want to go somewhere private? We should talk about what comes next." I nodded because he was right. We could not stand in the hall like ghosts thrown out of a castle. I led them to a small cafe across the street, a place I used to visit when the company felt too heavy for my spirit. The cafe smelled of roasted beans, fresh pastries, and freedom, something I had forgotten existed. We took the largest corner table. 22 people squeezed chairs together, some standing, leaning against walls, but everyone remained there with unwavering presence, their loyalty stunned. Me, I had spent 2 years in a company where fear ruled, and this was the first time I realized that genuine respect still existed in the world. Placed my hands on the table and looked at each of them one by one. "Why did you all walk out? You had stable careers, bright futures inside the company." I asked, not accusingly, but with genuine concern. Marcus answered first. "Isabella, we were surviving, not living inside that company. The pressure to obey, the pressure to be perfect, the pressure to stay silent, it was eating us alive. You were the only one who ever listened, the only one who treated us like humans. If you are gone, what is left for us?" Renee added, "It was never really a job. It was imprisonment disguised as success. You leaving gave us courage to look at ourselves again." Their words hit me deeply. I had always known Hale Enterprises was built on fear, but I did not realize how much pain had been hidden behind quiet faces and forced smiles. Leela leaned closer. Isabella, you are stronger than you think. You stood against Richard Hale. You faced humiliation and still walked out with dignity. We want to build something with you, not just follow you, but build with you, build something. The phrase tugged at a thought rapidly, forming inside my mind something new, something ours, something that did not belong to the Hale dynasty, something that did not demand silence in exchange for survival. Case could be a slow breath, letting the idea settle like a seed ready to grow before I dip. I could speak. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Adrian. We need to talk. I stared at the words, my heart tightening, not from love but from disappointment. Adrian, the man who vowed to stand with me through everything, had watched me crumble and done. Nothing worse, he had agreed with his father, agreed that I should be removed, as if my feelings, my dignity, my existence were disposable. Leela saw my expression. Is it him? I nodded. She understood without needing punctuation or explanation. Renee whispered. Isabella, you don't have to go. He made his choice. I knew she was right, but closure matters not for them, but for me. I needed to hear him say aloud what his silence had already confessed. Stood up slightly nervous but steady. I will talk to him, but promise me none of you will make any decisions until I come back. They all nodded. I grabbed my coat and walked outside. The cold air brushed my face, grounding me, reminding me that I was alive, still standing, still fighting. Adrian was waiting outside the company building, leaning against his shiny black car. His hands were in his pockets, his eyes down. A man drowning in guilt and confusion. But guilt means nothing if it comes too late. When he finally looked at me, the weight of unspoken truth hovered. Between us, Isabella, he said, his voice low, we need to clear this, I repeated inside my mind. He had sat silently while his father stripped me of my career, my dignity, my standing. He had not defended me, not even with a single word. He walked closer. I did not know he would fire you like that. I thought he was only going to move you to a different position. My heart tightened again. Conditional support, the kind that crumbles when challenged. Adrian, you agreed with him. He swallowed hard. I did not want conflict with my father there. It was the truth. The Hale dynasty mattered more to him than his wife. More than fairness, more than love. I looked into his eyes and saw fear. Fear of losing status, fear of standing up, fear of choosing me over power. I said quietly, Adrian, you did not lose me today. You let me go long before today. He went silent, his lips parted, but no words formed. I turned away, walking back toward the cafe, feeling lighter, not healed, but lighter. Some truths free you. Even when they heard inside the cafe, my team looked at me curiously. Thomas asked softly, how did it go? I replied, simply done, with a calmness I did not know I possessed. They nodded, not pushing further. Then I finally addressed the idea forming in my heart. We left that company because it was built on control and fear. What if we build something different? Something that belongs to us, something we can grow together. And something that proves Richard Hale miscalculated the power he tried to crochet. Spark flashed in their eyes. Thomas stepped forward. Are you thinking about starting our own firm, Leah? Added a consultancy, a development company, project firm? Anything. We have enough talent right here to run an entire department together in. Smiled Isabella. You can lead us. We believe in you more than we ever believed in that company. I felt something blossom inside me. Confidence, strength, purpose. This was no longer about revenge. It was about reclaiming my worth, reclaiming my story, reclaiming my strength. I told them, if we do this, we do it right, with integrity, transparency, and humanity. Arcus grinned. Then it is decided. We start our own company. Cheers erupted. Soft but powerful, a flame becoming a fire. But the empire of Richard Hale was not going to let us walk away quietly, and the moment our idea began to breathe the storm he unleashed would test every piece of courage we had just found. The decision to start our own company felt like stepping into a storm with nothing but courage as our shield. But courage was enough, sometimes more than enough. When we left the cafe, the 22 people who had stood with me looked different. Somehow more alive, more determined, as if the simple act of choosing themselves had unlocked a power they had forgotten they possessed. I spent the rest of the day sitting near the window of my small apartment, the same apartment Adrian had once promised we would leave soon for a bigger life. That promise was now dust in my memory. I stared at the city skyline, glowing like a restless ocean of lights, each tower a reminder of power and ambition. But this time I did not feel small, I felt ready. At night I opened my laptop and started sketching an idea for the company. I did not want to recreate the cold empire I had just escaped from. I wanted something human, something built on respect, collaboration, integrity, a place where no one had to fear speaking the truth. I typed endlessly, my thoughts pouring like a river, unstoppable. The next morning, we met again at the same cafe. It had become our temporary headquarters, our sanctuary of new beginnings. My team was already there, waiting with notebooks, laptops, and hope. Thomas started the discussion with a spark in his eyes. Isabella, we have all been thinking about this. If we combine our skills, we can create a powerhouse. We know how the industries work better than anyone else. We know what clients want, and we know exactly where Hale Enterprises fails. We have an advantage, Renee added, and we know each other. We trust each other. That alone is priceless. Leela smiled softly. This is not just business, Isabella. This is a revolution. There. Words settled inside me like the roots of a tree finding soil. I pulled out my notes and laid them on the table. We need to name something strong, something that represents us, not our past. But our future names began to fly around from every direction. Nova United, Apex, Collective, Horizon Development, but none of them felt like us then, Marcus said quietly. What about Phoenix Rise? Because we rise from ashes, stronger, braver, and unbroken. Though. Table fell silent for a moment, letting the words settle. Phoenix Rise, it felt perfect. It felt like us. It felt like me rising from the ashes of betrayal, humiliation, and loss. A new beginning built on fire and rebirth. Nodded. Phoenix Rise at ease. A wave of excitement pulsed across the table. We immediately began discussing responsibilities, resource planning, service categories, financial planning, and strategies. For obtaining our first clients, the air buzzed with energy. Each person contributed ideas. The conversations flowing like electricity. We were creating something powerful, something real. But storms always recognize when someone escapes their grasp, and Richard Hale was not a man who tolerated rebellion. By afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something pushed me to answer. Isabella speaking. A cold voice replied. Isabella, this is Grace, the legal head of Hale Enterprises. You are requested to come to the office tomorrow morning regarding company property and contractual obligations. The words were polite, but the tone held steel. I knew exactly what this was. Richard was striking back. He wanted to intimidate me, remind me of his power, remind me that I had walked away from his empire without permission, but I also knew something he didn't. I was no longer afraid. Told the team about the call. They exchanged concerned glances, but Thomas leaned forward. Isabella, you do not have to go. We can fight this legally. Shook my head. I am going. If he wants a confrontation, he will face me directly this time. I will not stand silently in front of him. The next morning, I walked into the Hale building, not as an employee, but as a woman who had been wronged and had risen stronger. The elevator ride felt strangely nostalgic, but the bitterness that once haunted me was gone, replaced by something sharper, confidence. When the boardroom doors opened, Richard was already sitting at the head of the table, arms crossed, lawyers beside him. Adrian stood near the wall, looking uncomfortable, guilt written across his face. The tension in the room was suffocating, but I walked in calmly, taking my seat. Without hesitation, Richard spoke first. Isabella, you have taken confidential data from this company, including project models and internal assessments. This is a breach of contract. His statement hit like a stone, not because it was true, but because it revealed how desperate he was becoming. I had taken nothing but my experience and skills. But Richard had never believed that knowledge could live inside a person. He thought power came only from possession. I replied calmly that accusation is false. I took nothing from your company except my dignity when you tried to strip it away. His jaw tightened. I demand access to your systems, your files, and your devices for investigation. I met his eyes, unafraid. You have no right to demand anything from me. I am no longer your employee, and you fired me without cause. You also humiliated me in front of an entire board. If anyone has grounds for legal action, it is me, his. Lawyers shifted nervously. Adrian finally spoke. Isabella, please, we can resolve this quietly. His voice cracked a little, but my heart did not move. He had chosen silence when I needed him most. I looked at him without emotion. Resolve what, Adrian? You stood there and let your father destroy everything I built. His eyes lowered again, unable to face the truth. Richard exhaled sharply. Isabella, you will not stand against me. You have no resources, no connections, no influence. You are nothing without. This company, his words echoed across the room, but inside me they turned into fuel. I leaned forward, voice steady. You are wrong, Richard. I have something far stronger than your empire. I have 22 people who believe in me, and together we are building something new, something that does not rely on fear, something that will rise higher than you can imagine for the first time. I saw a flicker of uncertainty in Richard's cold eyes, a small crack in his wall of power. I stood up, gathered my folder, and ended the meeting with one final truth. Richard, you did not break me. You built me without meaning to when you tried to destroy me. You created a leader, you created a movement, and you created a future that does not include youth. And I walked out without looking back. When I stepped outside the Hale building, the cold wind brushed against my face, but it felt like freedom. A freedom earned through pain and courage. Back at the cafe, the team waited anxiously. Thomas asked what happened. I looked at them with a proud, calm expression. He tried to scare me. He failed. Everyone smiled, relieved and energized. And that was the moment we officially began the paperwork to register Phoenix Rise. Next few days were chaos, beautiful, ambitious, hopeful. Chaos. We found a small workspace on the 5th floor of an old building. It was not luxurious like the Hale Tower, but it felt real. It felt ours. We cleaned it together, painted the walls, built desks, assembled chairs, and filled the room with laughter and dreams. Leela designed the logo, a golden phoenix rising from glowing embers. Thomas set up the operational systems. Renee created the communication strategy. Marcus organized project proposals. Everyone worked with passion and unity, but success does not come without noise. One evening, as I was locking the office door, a message popped up on my phone. Anonymous. Hale Enterprises is planning a full legal blockade against your new company. They want to stop Phoenix Rise before you even start. My heart skipped, but instead of fear, I felt fire. They could try, they could threaten, they could push, but they could not stop us. We had already risen on. The war Richard Hale was preparing to unleash would only make us stronger. The next morning arrived heavy with silence and frost, as if the world itself was holding its breath for what I would do after the chaos that had shaken the heart of Heart Global Dynamics. I woke up early, unable to rest because the weight of everything happening around me pressed on my chest like a stone. I was no longer an employee, no longer a daughter-in-law they respected, and no longer a silent figure who tolerated being looked down upon. I was now a woman with a mission, a woman who had watched power crush innocence, pride, and loyalty, and I was finally ready to stand against Edie. Stepped out of the apartment where I was staying temporarily, a small place lent to me by one of the 22 colleagues who had walked out with me the previous day. The winter wind brushed against my face, but it felt almost refreshing, empowering, and guiding me toward what I had to do next. I knew Edward Hart thought I would run, hide, or beg for forgiveness, but he had underestimated the fire inside Mizen's childhood. I had been taught to fight the kind of battles that had no weapons, only willpower. I had survived poverty, uncertainty, and a life where nothing belonged to me except the strength of my choices. I was not going to crumble just because a billionaire with more pride than humanity had tried to erase my career with one sentence. I met the 22 former colleagues in a rented co-working loft. It was a raw, unfinished place with exposed brick walls, metal pipes running across the ceiling, and sunlight breaking through dusty windows, but somehow it felt more like home than the glossy boardroom where Edward had humiliated me. The people who had walked out with me stood ready faces, tired eyes, burning with determination, and hearts loyal to the work we had created together. I looked at them and they looked at me, not as a daughter-in-law of a billionaire, but as a leader they trusted, and followed by choice. "Thank you for staying with me," I began, my voice steady, even without punctuation. "You walked out of everything because you believed in something more than money and titles, and I promise I will not let that faith break." They nodded, each one representing a story, a family, a risk, a dream. Jason, the senior analyst, stepped forward. "We are with you because you always treated us like humans, not tools," he said. "You never let power blind you. You worked with us, not above us. You deserve better than what they did to you." Sarah, the financial strategist, added, "And we do too. This is our chance to build something new, something honest, something ours." So's words filled the empty loft with purpose. Suddenly, it no longer felt like a place borrowed for the day. It felt like the birthplace of something extraordinary we spent hours mapping. Ideas, possibilities, new structures, and the kind of company we wished we had worked for all these years. People talked, scribbled, argued, shared, laughed, and for the first time in a long time, we felt freedom from arrogance, from manipulation, from boardroom politics, and from the icy stare of a billionaire who thought fear was the strongest tool of leadership. By afternoon, we had drafted the outline of a new firm, a consultancy built on transparency, creativity, and shared ownership. It was a seed, fragile but alive and breathing with hope. But with every new beginning, there comes a storm before the sun, and the storm arrived sooner than I expected. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a picture of me walking out of the boardroom, followed by the headline, "Billionaire CEO Edward Hart fires his own daughter-in-law. Another family drama hits corporate world." It was followed by a long article questioning my competence and painting me as the emotional, unstable woman who could not handle pressure for a moment. My hands trembled because I knew exactly who had leaked this. The same man who fired me without blinking, the same man who wanted to break me completely. So I never rose a goonie, placed the phone face down on the table, refusing to let a rich man narrative destroy the truth rising inside me. My colleagues noticed the shift in my expression and gathered around. "What now?" Sarah asked softly. "Now we fight," I said, and the words tasted fierce on my tongue. We brainstormed a response, a strategy not of revenge but of clarity. We gathered documents, emails, project proofs, and performance charts. Everything showing that my work had been spotless, my leadership effective, and my dismissal entirely personal and unjust. We decided our first move would be a public statement, not emotional but factual, not defensive, but empowering. While preparing this, I remembered Amelia, my wife, the woman who had stood silent in the boardroom, the woman who had watched me lose everything without stopping it. I had loved her deeply, purely, and honestly, but love that does not stand beside you during fire is not love. It is decoration. Sent her a message, short and simple, telling her that I needed answers and wanted to meet. She replied with a location, the Hart family penthouse. Left the loft for the meeting, my steps firm, though my chest tightened with every breath. The penthouse elevator opened into a living room wrapped in marble gold accents and silence. Amelia was sitting by the window staring at the skyline. She did not turn when I entered. "Why were you silent that day?" I asked, stepping closer. "Why did you watch your father destroy everything I built?" She finally turned, her face pale, eyes swollen from crying. Her voice soft. "Daniel, you do not understand my father. He threatened to cut me off, to take everything from me, to ruin my life if I went against him." I was scared. Her fear was real. I could see it, but so was the hurt that spread inside me. No one had stood by me when I needed it, not even the person who vowed to walk with me through every storm. "I understand fear," I said, "but I do not understand choosing comfort over truth. I do not understand watching me fall while you stayed seated." Tears rolled down her face, but I knew this was not a moment to comfort. It was a moment to decide the woman I loved was fading, replaced by someone too afraid to stand beside me, and no relationship can survive when fear is stronger than loyalty. I walked out of the penthouse without looking back, because sometimes stepping away is the only way to stay alive inside. When I reached the loft again, everyone was waiting for me. We finalized our announcement and scheduled it for morning. The night was long, but filled with purpose, laughter, plans, and a strange lightness, as if we already knew this path would lead somewhere far brighter than the boardroom. I had been kicked out of Oz. The sun finally rose, its rays spilling across the unfinished walls. I felt a shift inside me, a strength that was no longer quiet or hidden. This was not my downfall, this was the start of my ascent. The morning of our announcement arrived with a sky painted in soft gray, as if the world was preparing itself for the storm that was about to hit the Heart Empire. The co-working loft was filled with quiet energy, everyone moving with purpose, arranging documents, finalizing statements, reviewing timelines, and double-checking every detail that would shape the next chapter of our lives. I stood near the tall window, watching the city stretch awake below me. Cars moved like silver threads weaving through the streets. The sun climbed slowly behind the skyscrapers, and all around me, I felt the pulse of something powerful. Not fear, not uncertainty, but destiny. For the first time in my life, I was standing not as an employee, not as a daughter-in-law, not as a shadow beneath the weight of a billionaire name, but as the leader of a rising force forged in loyalty, truth, and courage. Sarah walked up to me holding a tablet. "The press release is ready," she said. "We can publish it whenever you want." I nodded. "Let us release it at 9 asterisk." As the clock reached 9, the announcement went live across all major platforms. It stated the truth clearly, without emotion, without bitterness, without accusation, simply facts. The boardroom incident, the unjust dismissal, the years of performance data, the respect I had earned from my team, and the decision of 22 employees to walk out in protest of unethical behavior. Within minutes, the digital world shook. Comments poured in, messages shared, retweets multiplied, and countless people expressed support for our courage. People admired the team unity, the rebellion against corporate injustice, and the strength of a woman who refused to bow down to a man who believed money was the only language of power. But naturally, storms attract storms. Edward Hart reacted swiftly, using his influence to release a counter-statement claiming I had been removed due to incompetence, emotional instability, and inability to work under pressure. He portrayed himself as a responsible leader, protecting the company from unqualified sobriety. Personnel *. My team read his statement, and a heavy wave of anger filled the room. But I raised my hand, stopping them. "Let him speak," I said. "His lies will not survive the truth. The world, however, loves drama," and soon media vans began circling the building, reporters waiting outside. Hoping to capture the next chapter of the saga, my phone buzzed endlessly, each notification like a drumbeat pushing me forward. In the midst of all this, Jason approached me with a folder. "We got interest," he said. "A private investor wants to meet you." I blinked, surprised. "Who?" "A woman named Evelyn Rowe." He handed me the portfolio. She owns several tech and consulting ventures with a history of supporting ethical startups. She wants to hear our ideas today. Hope surged in the room like a spark catching fire. We dressed simply and headed to her high-rise office, a place filled with greenery, open space, warm lighting, and an atmosphere of calm strength. Evelyn Rowe herself was a woman in her late 40s, confident, sharp, and observant. She studied us quietly, then smiled. I read everything she said. "Your courage is rare, your unity even rarer. Tell me what you intend to build." I spoke about the vision. A consultancy built on clarity, innovation, and shared growth, not hierarchy. A company where heads and hearts work together, where leadership meant responsibility, not intimidation. Where every voice mattered, every idea counted, and success was mutually created. She listened without interrupting, then leaned forward. "I am willing to invest," she said, "but only on one condition. You will remain the head of the company. You are the spine of this mission. Asterisk, a ripple of relief, pride, and disbelief washed over my team. This was the moment we had dared to dream of, but never expected. So soon, asterisk, we accepted her offer and the paperwork was set in motion. Asterisk, hours later, we returned to the loft, now buzzing with conversation, laughter, and tears of joy. The fear that once lived in the corners of that room had vanished, replaced with hope that filled every surface with new light. Asterisk. But as the celebration settled, something else happened. Asterisk, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but instinct told me to answer. I picked up, and the voice on the other end froze my breath. Which Edward himself, asterisk, Daniel, he said. If this is your attempt to humiliate me, you need to stop. You have no idea what you are doing. Asterisk, his tone was no longer commanding. No. Longer icy, it carried something new, something strange, something like fear. Asterisk. I held the phone calmly. Edward, this is not about humiliating you. This is about standing for what is right. Asterisk. He scoffed. I can destroy you. I can crush your little rebellion. I can ruin everyone who followed you. Do not push me. Asterisk. I felt no fear in that moment because I had already lost everything he could take. And what I had gained was something he could never buy. Loyalty, truth, respect, unity, and these were weapons far sharper than the cold weight of money. Asterisk, Edward, I said softly. You fired me thinking I would break. Instead, you freed me. And now I am building something stronger than anything you ever imagined. Asterisk. He did not speak for several seconds, then he disconnected. Asterisk. I lowered the phone and exhaled deeply. The team surrounded me, waiting for the next step. Asterisk, we keep going, I said. We do not stop, and we did not stop. Days passed with non-stop work, branding, planning, hiring, setting up systems, refining the vision. The new company took shape faster than any of us expected, fueled by passion and determination, and soon we launched our first service. Package companies began reaching out, impressed by our courage and clarity, and the revenue charts started rising steadily. Asterisk. But not all battles are fought in silence. Edward launched a smear campaign against us, negative articles, whispers in industry circles. Doubts seeded in potential clients. Yet with every attack, people only became more curious, more supportive, more eager to see what we were building. Asterisk. The truth has a strange power. It grows in the darkness and blooms in the light. Asterisk. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and rose, I stood alone on the balcony of our new office floor, watching the city glow beneath me. The wind brushed my hair, the buildings shimmered in the fading light, and for the first time in months, felt peace, pure, calm, uncluttered peace. Asterisk, my life had burned down in a boardroom, but from its ashes I was rising higher than I had ever dreamed. Asterisk, behind me, I heard footsteps. It was Jason. He smiled and said, "We got invited where?" I asked. "To a global business summit," he replied. "They want you to speak on resilient leadership." Asterisk. I looked at the city again and let the moment settle inside me. A woman who had been fired, humiliated, abandoned, and underestimated was now being invited to speak to leaders across the world. My story was no longer a tragedy. It was a transformation, and it was only the beginning. Asterisk. The world had seen my fall, but now it would witness my rise, one step, one voice, and one victory at a time. The days that followed were a whirlwind of momentum, as if every second held the weight of a new beginning. Our company grew faster than any of us had predicted. Contracts began pouring in, small firms, startups, creative agencies, and eventually even mid-level corporations seeking guidance that was honest and transparent. The loft that once felt too big now felt too small, and within weeks, we moved into a full office floor with glass walls, warm light, wooden textures, and an energy that felt alive with purpose. Every morning I arrived early, standing in the quiet halls, letting myself feel the gratitude that lived in my chest. Life had torn away everything I once believed was stability, but in return it had handed me something far greater. A family built not by blood but by choice and trust, but as our rise continued, so did the tension outside. The Hart Empire had begun cracking in places, the public unaware of the chaos happening behind their gilded doors. Edward had doubled down on his smear campaign, but the more he tried to paint me as unstable, the more the world noticed the cracks in his narrative. I never responded emotionally, never fought back with bitterness. I simply continued working, letting progress speak the truth. He tried to bury one afternoon. I sat in my new office reviewing a proposal when Evelyn Rowe, our investor, walked in, her expression thoughtful and serious. She sat across from me and gently placed her phone on the table, showing me an article headline: Hart Global Dynamics faces internal audit after employee complaints. I looked up at her. Surprised, Evelyn nodded quietly. The board called for the audit, not Edward. The company has been unstable since you left. Morale dropped, productivity dropped. Several executives reported unethical conduct. I was silent for a moment, not out of joy or revenge, but out of a strange ache that formed inside me. I had given years of my life to that company, and to see it falling apart because of one man, pride cut deeper than any blade. Devlin leaned forward. Daniel, you need to prepare for what comes next. What comes next? I asked softly. She exhaled. Or a collapse. Either way, you need to stay ready. Nodded. My fight was never to destroy Hart Global Dynamics. It was simply to survive, but life has a way of twisting battles into places we never expect. At an evening, I gathered my team and filled them in on everything. Not to create fear, but to ensure clarity. Transparency had always been our strength, and I wanted it to remain, so everyone listened attentively, absorbing every detail. Then Sarah spoke, her voice steady. All they fall because of their own choices. We do not interfere, we just keep doing what we do. Her words were simple but powerful. The room hummed with agreement. In the following weeks, our growth continued, and soon we were approached by international companies seeking long-term partnerships. Our consultancy had become a symbol of resilience, integrity, and modern leadership. My name began appearing in magazines, interviews, and conference invitations, but I never let any spotlight distract me from the purpose that birthed this journey. Then, one afternoon, something completely unexpected happened. Received a message from Amelia. She wants to meet Jason, said, handing me my phone. His voice carefully neutral, knowing the history that weighed. Tween UIC stared at the screen for a long moment. The name that once carried warmth now felt like a distant echo of a life buried under truth and betrayal. Meet me at the old lakeside park, she wrote. I need to talk, please. Jason asked softly. Are you going to see her? Yes, I said quietly. Because closure is not weakness, it is clarity. The park was quiet when I arrived, the lake calm, the sky turning soft shades of blue and lavender. Amelia stood by the water, her arms wrapped around herself. Her face looked tired, older, almost as if years had passed in weeks. She turned when she heard my steps, and for a moment her eyes softened with a familiarity I once knew. Deeply thank you for coming, she said. I nodded. Waiting for her to speak, she inhaled shakily. I am leaving the penthouse. I am leaving my father. I blinked, confused. Why? Because he was wrong, she whispered. He was wrong to fire you. He was wrong to humiliate you. He was wrong to manipulate me. And I was wrong to stay silent. Her tears fell freely now, and for the first time. I did not feel anger, only a slow, quiet sorrow. I never hated you, I said gently. I only wished you had stood beside me even once. She nodded, crying harder. I know I failed you, and I hope one day you find someone who will fight for you the way you deserve. I cannot undo what happened, but I can start living honestly now. I placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, not as a lover, not as a partner, but as someone letting go. You deserve healing, Amelia. We both do, but not together anymore. I walked away from the lake. I felt a chapter close inside me, not with pain, but with peace, because forgiveness is not reconciliation, it is release. The next day, another shock arrived. Word: Hart requested a meeting. Team reacted instantly with tension, worry, disbelief. But I agreed to meet him, not because I feared him, but because I had finally understood. That real strength is facing what once tried to destroy youth meeting was arranged in a private conference room of a neutral business center. When I walked in, he was already seated, looking smaller, older, the edges of his confidence cracked his. Eyes lifted when I entered, but they held none of the arrogance they once carried Daniel. He began, his voice low. "I've come to apologize." Silence filled the room. He continued. "I have lost the respect of my board, my employees, and my daughter I have. Lost control over the company I built. It took your absence to show me the truth of how deeply I damaged everything around May." Watched him quietly, not bitter, not triumphant, simply present. He lowered his gaze. "I am stepping down as CEO, the board. We'll vote tomorrow. I will recommend you as an external advisor to help stabilize the company." Inhaled slowly, absorbing the shock. The man who once fired me without blinking was now asking for my guidance. "Will not take pleasure in your downfall." I said, "But I will help the company because the employees do not deserve to suffer for your mistakes." He nodded slowly. "Thank you, Az." I walked out of the room. The air felt lighter, the weight of years lifting off my shoulders. The next morning I stood on the balcony of our office watching the sunrise stretch across the city, golden, hopeful, alive. My team gathered behind me, our growing company buzzing with life, new clients, new ideas, new voices. I had been fired in a boardroom. I had been humiliated, silenced, underestimated, but every wound had become a doorway, every fall a foundation, every loss a beginning. My rise was not loud, not vengeful, not fueled by anger, but by truth, integrity, and unbreakable resilience. This was not the end of my story. This was the birth of a legacy. The morning light drifted into our new office floor with a soft, golden calm, as if the city itself knew that today would be a turning point. Not just for me, but for the 22 people who stood beside me when my world broke. There was a sense of quiet victory in the air, the kind that follows storms, the kind that collects in the heart. When a person realizes they have survived everything meant to destroy them. We gathered in the main conference area, a space filled with warm wooden textures, gentle light plants arranged with care, and whiteboards scribbled with dreams and plans. The team took their seats, faces bright, eyes alert, ready to hear what came next. Before I could speak, Sarah placed a report on the table. We closed 3 new contracts. She said softly, "These alone will stabilize our operations for the next 8 months." Applause filled the room. Jason added, "Also, the summit organizers confirmed your keynote slot. We will attend as a team." The joy in the room rose like sunlight, lifting every shadow around us, but I raised a hand gently. "I have something important to share." First, everyone fell silent yesterday. I met with Edward. I began. "He is stepping down as CEO of Heart Global Dynamics. The board will vote today. He wants us to help stabilize the company after he leaves the room." Did not gasp or whisper. Their silence was deep, controlled. They waited for direction because they trusted I would give them the truth. Jason leaned forward. "What do you want us to do?" I looked around the room at the faces that had walked away from high salaries, corporate stability, predictable futures. They had followed me into the unknown and built something beautiful from nothing. They deserved clarity, purpose, and assurance. "I will help the company," I said, "but only if it benefits the employees and protects the integrity of our work. We do not go back. We do not become theirs. We remain who we are, standing on our own feet." Their eyes softened with pride and relief. "We will assist as external consultants under strict agreements," I continued, "and only if the company commits to ethical rebuilding." Sarah smiled quietly. "That is leadership, Daniel." But leadership still required one more step, and that step was facing the board of Heart Global Dynamics. The same people who once allowed Edward to fire me in silence and fear. The meeting was scheduled for the afternoon. I went alone, not out of arrogance, but to show that what I carried was not an army behind me, but strength, earned through loss and rebirth. There, Boardroom looked different now, colder, emptier, as if the walls remembered the choices that had led to collapse. The board members sat stiffly, waiting for me. The senior chairman, Mr. Alden, gave a slow nod. "Thank you for coming." I took my seat, calm, steady. "Clear we need your help," he said. "The company is in crisis. Investors are pulling back. morale is shattered, and the audit reports point to severe internal failures. Listened, without reacting, because this room had taken much from me once, and I would not give it another piece of my emotion. What do you want from me? I asked. Guidance. He replied, and a structural recovery plan. Your name carries trust now. People believe in you far more than they believe in us. For a moment, silence wrapped around the room. The irony was sharp. I once lived in the shadows of their approval, and now they lived in the shadow of my integrity. It will help, I said, but under strict boundaries. I will not work for you. I will work with you, and only if transparency becomes the foundation of every decision from this moment forward. The board nodded quickly, almost gratefully. Their desperation was evident, but so was their sincerity. They had seen the consequences of arrogance and now clung to the possibility of redemption. When I walked out of that boardroom, I did not feel victorious. I felt free, finally, and entirely free upon returning to our office. I found my team waving banners in their hands, confetti cannons disguised as office supplies, and smiles wide enough to stretch across the city. Jason walked forward, holding a file. What is this? I asked. He grinned. Your new title. Opened the file and found a certificate printed with care and heart. Founder and Chief Vision Officer. The room burst with laughter and playful cheers, but beneath the joy was something deeper. A bond forged from shared pain, perseverance, and unwavering trust. I thanked them all quietly, overwhelmed but steady. Then I invited everyone to the rooftop for a speech I had never once imagined giving. Sky was starting to glow with streaks of pink and gold, the wind soft, the city humming below us. The 22 colleagues who had risked everything for me stood in a circle, each one a living reminder that real loyalty is chosen, not demanded. I spoke from my heart. We rose from nothing. I said we were pushed out, laughed at, undermined, and painted as failures. Yet here we are, stronger than we ever were inside those glass walls. We built something honest and powerful and just, and this is only the beginning. They clapped softly, not loudly, because some victories do not need noise, they need memory. The next day we traveled to the Global Business Summit. The hall was massive, filled with thousands of leaders, innovators, entrepreneurs, journalists, and dreamers. The stage glowed under soft lights, banners hung high, and my name appeared on the screen behind the podium. When I stepped onto the stage, the room fell still, not out of fear, but respect, the respect that comes only when people know your story carries truth heavier than gold. I began my speech with the same tone I had used to steady myself during the darkest nights. Leadership, it's not power, it is responsibility. Leadership is not control, it is integrity. Leadership is not silence, it is courage. Leadership is not inherited, it is earned. The hall erupted into applause, not because my fall had been dramatic, but because my rise had been honest. After the summit, companies flooded us with invitations, partnerships, offers, and collaboration requests. Our inbox overflowed, our team grew, and within months we became one of the fastest rising consultancies in the region. Still, through all of it, I never forgot the boardroom where everything ended and then began again one quiet morning. Months later, I visited the old building alone. The halls were empty, the lights dim, the atmosphere hollow. I stepped into the boardroom where my story had shattered. The long tables seemed smaller, the walls less intimidating, the chairs less powerful. I stood in the center and closed my eyes, letting the past breathe one last time, not to hurt me, not to bind me, but to honor the fire that had shaped my path. I whispered a single sentence into the silent room. Thank you for freeing me. Then I walked out and never looked back, because the world I was building was ahead of me, not behind me, and this time it was Mania. Legacy built not from the approval of the powerful, but from the courage of the broken. A legacy that rose from rejection, abandonment, and betrayal. A legacy carried by 22 brave souls who chose truth over comfort. My story did not end in a boardroom, it began therein. It will continue rising long after the doors of that room close forever. The sun rose, slowly casting long golden rays across the city, and the office floor felt alive with purpose and quiet triumph. I walked among the team, watching faces, bright eyes, focused hands, moving with energy and hearts beating with courage and hope. Each person represented a story of risk, of faith in me and in themselves. And I realized how far we had come from the day 22 of us walked out of that boardroom, humiliated and uncertain. Asterisk. The news of our success had reached even distant cities. Invitations poured in. Clients sought us not because of fame or wealth, but because they believed in integrity and resilience. My name was appearing in interviews, magazines, podcasts, and yet I never let it shift my center, because the true achievement was the unity and purpose we had built together. Asterisk. I decided to visit the old boardroom one final time, to honor the journey that had begun with fire and humiliation and had grown into a legacy. When I entered the empty space, the sunlight streamed through tall windows, dust motes dancing like tiny sparks of memory. The long table looked smaller now, the walls less intimidating, the chairs no longer threatening. I felt no anger, only a quiet reverence for the past and the lessons it had forged in me. Asterisk. I walked to the center of the room, closed my eyes, and whispered a simple truth. Thank you for making me rise. Asterisk. The next day we hosted a gathering on our new rooftop, a place filled with laughter, music, and conversations. The team celebrated the milestones, achievements, and personal growth, every face reflecting the fire of survival and the joy of victory. I stood at the edge, looking out over the city's skyline, and felt the weight of the journey lift off my shoulders. Asterisk. Then a message arrived. On my phone, it was Amelia. She had finally left the penthouse and started a life of her own. She wanted to meet one last time to say goodbye properly. I agreed, and we met at the lakeside park, the same park where I had once confronted fear and betrayal. Her eyes were softer, calmer than before. I could see growth and courage in her as well. Asterisk. I walked toward her, and she smiled softly. Thank you for everything, she said, for teaching me strength, for showing me what truth really is, and for forgiving what I could not forget. Asterisk. I nodded gently, because closure is not about reconciliation, it is about peace. You deserve your life, she said. I smiled and said, and you deserve yours. Asterisk. We parted silently, with respect, not regret, and I felt a freedom deeper than any success I had achieved. Asterisk. Weeks later, I stood on the stage of a global summit, the hall massive, filled with thousands of leaders, innovators, dreamers, the lights bright, the screens glowing. My name on the background. I took a deep breath and began. Asterisk. Leadership is not inherited. Leadership is not bought. Leadership is not wielded. Leadership is earned. Leadership is built on courage, compassion, and unwavering integrity. Today, I speak not just of success, but of survival, not just of power, but of truth, and above all, the ability to rise when the world pushes you down. Asterisk. The audience listened in rapt attention, the applause roaring at the end, not for spectacle, but for the authenticity of the journey they had witnessed, in words, in presence, and in spirit. Asterisk. Returning to our office, the team erupted into celebration. Confetti, laughter, music, and cheers filled the air, but amidst all the joy, I gathered everyone for a moment of reflection. Asterisk. We did not rise alone. I said we rose together. We rose from ashes of betrayal, from rooms of fear, from days of uncertainty. Every challenge strengthened us. Every setback fueled our courage. This legacy is not mine alone. It belongs to all of you. Asterisk. Tears of joy rolled on faces, smiles, wide hands holding tightly to one another. The rooftop echoed with unity, triumph, and hope. Asterisk. Months passed, and Phoenix Rise became a recognized symbol of ethical leadership, innovation, and fearless integrity. We expanded internationally, hired thousands, helped countless businesses, and inspired a generation of young leaders to rise from their own ashes. Asterisk. One quiet evening, I returned to the lakeside. Alone, the sky painted with shades of rose and amber, the water calm like a mirror reflecting the city lights. I realized the journey that had begun with fire, humiliation, and betrayal had transformed not just my life, but the lives of everyone who had believed in truth over fear. Asterisk. I whispered to the wind, I am free, I am strong, I am rising higher than ever before. Asterisk, and as the city slept below. The skyscrapers glowed like stars, reminding me that no force in the world could contain the spirit of someone who chooses courage over comfort, loyalty over fear, and truth over power. Asterisk, the boardroom that once destroyed me had birthed me the people who left everything for me, had built the wings that carried us all that remained, was forward rising ever higher unbroken. Unstoppable, unstoppable, unstoppable. Unstoppable, my story had begun with loss. It grew through struggle, and now it soared with legacy. The world would remember not the humiliation of a fired daughter-in-law, but the rise of a woman who refused to be broken, who gathered courage like armor, who inspired trust like light, and who created a legacy that would echo long after every building. Doors closed and every name faded. Asterisk. I turned to look at the horizon, golden streaks of light painting the future, and smiled because this was only the beginning. A beginning that would rise higher, stronger, brighter, and forever unbound.